Hello, my name is Christoph Neumann. I am the Clojure Developer Advocate on the Clojure core team. And I am here with Peter Strömberg, otherwise known as Pez in the community, and Nate Jones, who I also host a podcast with. And we're here to talk about the Clojure survey. But I just want to give you each a chance to introduce your own self. So Peter.
Yeah, so I'm Peter Strömberg, and also known as Pez, and also known as the Calva guy. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. I'm a dev tooling nut, really. So and simply in love with Clojure. So that's me.
And I'm Nate Jones. Christoph and we have a fun podcast, Clojure Design, Functional Design and Clojure. And I also host the Los Angeles Clojure Meetup. And I've been fascinated with Clojure for a long time. So definitely fun, and looking forward to talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I thought we would just spend some time looking at some of the survey highlights and digging in a little bit. It's always hard to just put all of the content in the write up. There's some nuance, and of course, we're all coming from different perspectives in the Clojure community, and so I thought it would be fun to just spend some time talking about that and put that out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the survey results here and spend a little bit of time discussing each of the results from our own perspective. And so you can find these results on clojure.org and read them if you haven't already. And we have a link to the full report where you can get all of the interesting things, versions of things people are running, and so on and so forth. And then this is some of the interesting highlights that I noticed when I was analyzing the results. And so go to clojure.org and you can see that in the news area. You can find a link to the full results. So to open the conversation here, one of the things that we did this year that's new is we tried to look at Clojure's use across different countries. And so we had over 80 countries represented. And some of those countries really stood out by just number of respondents. So we had a high number of respondents in US, Brazil, Germany, United Kingdom. Those constituted half of the respondents, in fact. And so you can see in this graphic where the blue is darker, you have more respondents. Where it's lighter, you have fewer or none. But then it gets very interesting when you do per capita. And so in per capita analysis, you see in Northern Europe, in Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland. I think actually, Pez, you might know something about Clojure in Sweden. You can see the results are very high. So I'm very curious to hear some thoughts.
Yeah, it actually blows me away. With Scandinavia, just brings this, the top four. It's very, very interesting, and I don't know. I can't even form a theory why that would be, but it is super striking. And you don't see US and you don't see Brazil among the top 10.
They're actually very close to the median. So when I was analyzing it, once you do per capita analysis, there Austria, Australia, United States, Brazil, and Canada are all around the middle. So they're not low in terms of per capita, but they're not the highest. It's actually a bunch of countries in Europe, and of course Uruguay as the outlier here, representing South America. But yeah, they're more in the median, which is interesting.
It is interesting. If I could speculate a bit about it, it is a bit the structure in Scandinavian companies is very flat, and decisions are pushed out to the people who are affected by them, and maybe that drives people picking up functional and Clojure as a tool because they the one that actually are affected by that choice. And then some other countries, it's more top down and decided by people who don't have skin in the game in the same manner. That's my only theory around it.
I think aren't the Scandinavian countries like historically have a very high quality of living and very happy people? Like they're like the happiest people in the world. So I don't know if there's some crossover there. If Clojure helps or if Clojure that's because
Yeah, the
um,
causation chain is probably Clojure happy.
I do think that there's probably something to do with like what large companies have chosen Clojure, and then they often will have other companies nearby that like not cast off, but like like I'm sure there's plenty of companies in Brazil that use Clojure because Nubank uses Clojure, and so that's why it makes a a community. And so I wonder if there's like a few companies in Germany or the few companies in the UK or in the Scandinavian countries that like started it and have it kind of like in a good way, like a virus, like it's like it's spreading.
Yeah.
You're just seeing where it starts in a good way.
It's a good virus. Yeah, I will say that when I've looked at other data sets, functional programming in general tends to be more represented in Europe than in other parts of the world, just kind of as a trend. My personal theory is functional programming is a pretty high leverage for the developer.
Mm-hmm.
And within functional programming, you have a few different styles that count as functional programming. Data flow is an example sometimes of functional programming. You have Clojure, which is sort of a purely functional immutable language. Haskell is another example of purely functional immutable. You have kind of more of your classic functional oriented languages like traditional Lisp or ML even, where they allow you to like OCaml, right? They allow you to do some other multi-paradigm styles.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a lot of research in functional programming. So the Swiss Technical Institute, that's like where the um, Scala research team is. So Martin Ordesky is there, and so anyway. There's a lot of functional programming in Europe already, and so my theory is high leverage. You need to make a big impact with smaller teams or fewer resources. And I've also, in my own experience in the television industry, which is totally different, you see that like you saw adoption of the open broadcasting system OBS go really big in Europe, where once again you're doing productions on smaller budgets, smaller teams, and so open source tooling is huge there too, right? So I think that's my theory around it.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting what industry might push adoption versus adoption organically.
Let's
Yeah.
take a look at this. So in analyzing it, I looked at the years of professional experience. And so there is an interesting cut point. So somewhere I was looking 5 years or less. I feel like if you survive 5 years as a professional industry, you're probably going to stick around for a while, right? And so for some reason that I wasn't looking for a true median here. I think if you wanted a true median, it's actually a little bit closer here to, dividing between 10 and 11. But I was looking for people who are really sticking around as professional developers. They're not totally young. They've been around long enough to have some projects possibly fail, or move jobs. And so about 82% of Clojure developers are in that 6 or more category. So there is a large population of Clojure users that have, I would view them as like on the path for career programmers or career programmers.
Yeah, they're locked in. It's funny. It's funny that we would consider, and I agree with the line of 5 or 6 years, but that considering 5 or 6 years as being like you're in it for good, that's not a very long time career wise. I mean, careers are what 30 or 40 years long, and that you can be 6 years into being a developer, and you're in your mid or late 20s, and you're already set, so to speak. But I do agree that there's definitely like a momentum to sticking with it. So I'm actually like, if you had asked me before I looked at the survey, like what percentage of people are like above like 10 or 15, I would say most of the community is above 10 or 15, because most of the people that I've encountered are, you know, later in their careers. I guess maybe middle of their careers. I don't know. It depends on how long your career is. And so to see so many in the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 is, well, I mean, it's I think it's encouraging, because then there's still a lot more time for them to influence, a lot more time for them to grow. Yeah, I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. I'm going to reiterate what I said before a bit, that when you have agency to choose your tools, I guess picking up Clojure and stuff like it makes sense. And something that also drives agency is seniority. So I would expect more senior developers with more years to gear towards functional and Clojure. Then, but when you're a junior, you don't have a say in the same sense. Then,
so you're saying, like, as a junior developer, you are handed a language when you join a company. You don't get to pick it, but then as a senior developer, you can pick your own language because you have more clout. Yeah, I think that's a very valid thing.
That's one of the drivers here. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I do want to add that I expanded the years of professional programming experience than we had in the previous survey. I think the previous survey started at 25 and up, and it was like a very high bar. And actually, Peter, when I was talking to you, you mentioned that you were, I think, more than 35 years of experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's the last one.
I said, well, I at least need to expand the categories all the way up to get that level of resolution. Because when you just have a bunch of people who are 25 and up, you know, what's the long tail look like there? And so I'm really happy I did that
that's why we see these. Yeah, that was a very good call. But another thing I think that maybe it's obvious a bit, it's like with seniority, the agency is one thing, but another thing is also the experience. So if you look at the Clojure proposition in a sense, maybe you actually need a lot of failures and a lot of pain and stuff like that with object-oriented or whatever other paradigms in order to understand the value prop that comes from Clojure. So if someone tells you that, yeah, this is actually going to make you have less problems or whatever, it's just someone saying that, but after 5 years and banging your head against some paradigms and stuff like that, you're ready, in a sense, more ready, I guess, to give something that seems to address your pain points. But you need to have the pain points first.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I found Clojure to be fantastic for maintenance, right? I mean, it's fantastic in interactive development. It's fantastic in other areas, but this aspect of maintenance, like, you have to live with a code base for a while and you have to see code change hands. And it takes a few years of experience to see that effect. Although sometimes I remember the very first large code base I walked into, I was working at Hewlett Packard, so HP at the time, and it was a pretty substantive code base. I walked in and I just figured, oh, I'm going to get up to speed on this, and then I'm going to know this, and I'm going to live in this code base for a while. And that actually wasn't really true. It underwent all kinds of churn when I was there. I switched projects a number of times. And so in the first few years of my kind of big company career, I realized, oh man, like, walking into a code base and all these nuances and all this stuff to know and all these issues. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. And so I think like you say, Peter, like once you've experienced more of that, of the challenges of maintenance and the challenges of dependency hell and the challenges of somebody changed something over here and it caused something over there to explode, and you're like, how are those related or connected? And Clojure solves these problems quite well. And so you start looking around for, is there a better way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the difficulties, and I'm sure we'll cover this at some point, but like in getting more people to use Clojure, to understand the value proposition, is like you early on, you're just so used to the pain that you experience in maintenance that you don't realize that there's a possibility of not having it. And so oftentimes there'll be solutions to problems you don't have. Like we talked about that a lot on our podcast. And I feel like in some ways Clojure has made me more sensitive to those things in other languages, where you, like if I'll program in a Python program or in a Go program or something, and I feel like I'm like walking on the edge of a cliff, and there's no guardrail, there's no safety net, there's nothing. Like I've got nothing to help me. It's all my own discipline. But in Clojure, there's a lot more that helps you with that. And so yeah, it often makes you like not you don't want to go back to those other things. But the thing is that you can't tell someone that, like you said, Pez, you can't tell someone about that. You can only experience it.
Yeah.
And that's a very person to person thing, you know?
Yeah. So it's if you're using some programming language and tooling, and you have a lot of that churn, and someone comes tells you after you have experienced that for a while, you don't need to have that. There are actually other ways to do this, and you don't have. Then more people will probably be happy to listen to you and try that out. Whether if you come to someone happy with their Clojure tooling and say, "Hey, you should be using this instead, Java, whatever," and yeah, then the answer is more like, "Yeah, from my cold dead hands," right? So it's it's a different. I think really, you need to figure it out yourself what you actually want, and then I think we will see, and we see among Clojurians that it's people who pick it up and stay with it for a while, or not leaving.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so I also, when I was analyzing the results, I had a question in my mind: is Clojure only attracting experienced people, right? Like, do you kind of toward our theory here? I do believe that you experience problems in those first 5 years of professional programming experience that you didn't experience in school, that maybe you didn't experience as much in hobby programming. And so then I became concerned that maybe, does Clojure have to use a marketing term, value proposition, right? Or is it attractive to people who are new in their professional programming journey or are not professional programmers? So I segmented out the data based on that. And so this graph here is people who have a year or less of Clojure experience, and we're plotting by their professional experience. So there's a graph of professional experience for people who are new to Clojure. And I was very surprised. I'm maybe very surprised is strong, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that there's a very wide range of professional experience of people who are new to Clojure. And we actually have a pretty nice contingent of people with no professional experience who are new to Clojure.
They're brand new, their first programming language. It's like, I didn't think that would exist, but there's almost 12% of the people. Wow.
Well, it may not be their first programming language, but they're not programming professionals. So they could be professionals of other kinds, or they could be academics, or but they're not programming professionals.
Yeah, so that's very, very interesting. I know in Stockholm, in the what is called the Royal High School of Technology, KTH, there is a math professor who also teaches programming. His name is Thomas Ekholm, and he teaches a course of programming. It's called large systems programming or something like that. And he used to do it in Java. Then he discovered Clojure, and then he said that he would quit if he would have to have a course in Java. So now that course is since 5-6 more years. It's in they are using Clojure. Like I don't know if like 50 or something like that new Clojurians coming out of that course every year, and so that might explain a bit about what we saw with Sweden and Clojure. But an interesting thing is that I met a few of these people at the Funk Prog conference, the first installment this fall, and for some reason people heard that I like Clojure, and then I go speak to those guys over there, and that was all his old students, and they were like still super fans of Clojure. I think only one of them were using it professionally, but they all wished they were using it professionally. So maybe that speaks against a bit what I said before about the need to have the pain. You can also be introduced to Clojure by someone who shows you the joy of it, and then be a stayer. So I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway, it was very interesting to meet these people and see how they were like. Thomas Ekholm had all really grabbed the minds of these people with Clojure. So it was very fascinating to see.
Yeah, I think what your point about agency earlier comes through is like Clojure is not one of the most popular languages. And so when you get into the realm of popularity, there's other factors that go into play, right? And so there seems to be this theme of developers, when developers are making the choice, when developers are kind of driving the choice, you're going to see this higher adoption of Clojure. When the CTO perhaps is making the choice, you're going to potentially see lower adoption of Clojure. We have some exceptions to that. For example, Nubank is an exception. You had the CTO pick Clojure and drive that into the organization, and you have a extraordinarily high adoption of Clojure in Brazil because of that. So when you can get a high-ranking person in a organization that then begins to scale due to market success, then you see all of these developers that kind of come into the language through that, right? And there's Clojure developers at Nubank who probably wouldn't be using Clojure had they not gotten hired on at Nubank. Yeah. For sure, right? And so there's these different reasons for adopting Clojure, and there's different forces. They're not all the same, but I really like your point about agency, like personal agency being a factor.
I think that goes also to these instances where the CTO chooses it. It is still, if CTO chooses Clojure, it's a top-down thing still, right? And okay, so you have people using Clojure because the CTO told you, and and they might not use it in the way like you should use it, or whatever. They feel pain with it. So the moment that CTO goes, they bring in whatever it is they want to use instead, or the new CTO brings in, and they start like migrating from Clojure. And
yeah, I have heard stories of people that join a company and that are like, there was a previous developer who liked Clojure, but now that person is gone, and now I'm saddled with it. I need to go and learn it. There's a negative connotation, and I think that's what you're saying coming out. And
so it needs to be your choice to use
well, you also,
to be for you to have away from it.
Even if it's not your choice initially, it needs to become your choice over time. Otherwise, the technology choice won't. Yeah, it's surprising how much of technology is more about human behavior and less about the actual technology.
Totally agree.
Yeah, and so then on that topic, we asked people this year what is your primary language, right? Because I wanted to really understand how Clojure is used in a mix of languages. I had a theory that Clojure is not the sole language for most professional developers, but it's in a mix of languages. And so is it their primary language? What other languages do they use? And so of the respondents, about 2/3 of them are using Clojure or one of its dialects. So Clojure, Clojure Script, or Babashka, or Clojure Dart, as one of its dialects, as their primary language. But then now we're seeing it in a mix, and I know there's like really skinny lines over here, but I just wanted to try to see if this is a functional thing or a Clojure thing, right? And so my read on this, and going and comparing it against data around language popularity, is the ranking of these languages is most informed by popularity, right? Python, Java, TypeScript, Go, JavaScript, C, and not even by functional style, because we see our functional languages, Scala, Haskell, Groovy, sort of, it's like multi-paradigm, Erlang, right? Elixir, kind of being ranked relatively approximately the same as they are in popularity schemes.
That's interesting.
So there's not like a follow-on effect that if you use Clojure as your primary language, then you might use these other languages also. It's more, it's just the regular popularity curve.
Well, and then we asked also, what other languages have you used in the last year, right? So the first question was, what's your primary? What's your primary?
Yeah.
And so the primary was clearly Clojure was going to be most of the respondents, because this is a Clojure survey. And so we had what you would call a selection bias, right? So hopefully most of the people taking the Clojure survey are using Clojure in a big way. And then now we're asking people, what languages you use? Firstly, it's interesting. We had people respond. So there's people responding to the survey who feel an identification with Clojure in some way, but did not use it in the last year, which is kind of interesting, right? They're plugged into the community still, and for some reason they're not using it. But then when you look at this distribution of other languages, right, then now what's going on? And the functional languages here are overrepresented versus their general popularity. Elixir, if you look at like the Stack Overflow survey, or if you look at, I'm totally blanking on the TIOBE index or whatever, Elixir has a much smaller percentage. So people who use Clojure are also reaching for functional languages as companion languages in the mix more often, whereas the primary language choice seems driven, more possibly, I speculate, by work use, some other factors, not I want it. Whereas the secondary companion languages, if I get to use Clojure, I'm reaching for these other functional languages. They're highly overrepresented versus their popularity. Elixir, Scala.
But also there's a dynamic part of this, right?
Yeah, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think as a TypeScript programmer, which I am, I see like JavaScript and TypeScript as the same thing. So to me, I read this that JavaScript is almost competing with Clojure in this graph here.
Well, you can't just add them up because this is a multi-select. So,
yeah,
you
but
could,
I can add them up in my mind because that's how I read it. And then you have like Clojure, and then you have JavaScript, and then you have Python, and they are like distinctly dynamic languages.
Yeah, the popularity up there.
Then I guess it also could explain why Ruby and Elixir and those are a bit overrepresented in this mix as well.
I think one of the things that Clojure does well is it has a lot of good ideas. Like, obviously, I think that the best implementation of those ideas is in Clojure, but I know of several programmers who are, whether by choice or not, they're post-Clojure programmers, as in they're no longer, but they're still using those ideas. Or there are people that never got to use Clojure, but I have interacted with them and I have used a Clojure concept and taught them that, and then they have attached to that. But they're a Python programmer, but that concept lives on in their Python programs. And so I think this question does highlight the, like, I will reach for other functional programming languages, but what it doesn't show is how much of the Python or the JavaScript or the Java programming that's done is influenced by Clojure. I don't know how we would expose that, but I think that there's the ideas have much farther reach than the language. I know that, but I don't know how we'd be able to see that. You know what I mean?
Maybe you can see it in this data, but to me, what collaborates that is the polylith is very popular actually in Python, because David Vulic, who was working on the team where they invented polylith, he's a Python programmer these days, and he brought like polylith with it and made a implementation in Python, and it's very popular. So it's spreading like that way into the Python community. Some of these super good Clojure ideas. So
well, and we'll see this a little bit in the next question, but Elixir was heavily influenced by Clojure. So Jose Valim, the creator of Elixir, has publicly acknowledged on a number of occasions Clojure's influence on Elixir. It's not the sole influence. And you can definitely, as you learn Elixir, you can definitely see Clojure's impression there on choices in the language. And so, like to your point, there is this effect. It'd be fun to try to figure out how to measure it, but there is sort of this effect that you see of Clojure's influence on other things for sure. And so then I think the next one was a bit of a surprise. So let me explain this a little bit. I'm very interested both in who is coming into Clojure, and also once somebody's a Clojure developer, how likely are they to stick around, right? So measures of attraction, measures of satisfaction. And so to that end, we asked a question: if you couldn't use Clojure, what programming language would you use instead? This is known as like the second best alternative, right? The idea that if I can't have what I really want, what will I settle for is informative. And so in my analysis for this question, I wanted to segment out people who were not using Clojure as their primary, because they already don't have Clojure, right? And so when you look at the survey results, unfortunately, SurveyMonkey doesn't give us a good way of making like custom segmentations in our analysis there, which is part of why I wrote this up and put it on Clojure.org. But I wanted to, for the people who said Clojure or one of its dialects is its primary, right? Like Clojure is my thing, and if I can't have my thing, what would I do instead? And much to my surprise, well, on principle, I put in quit programming because I wanted an option. I wanted an option that wasn't a programming language. It seemed unfair to force somebody to choose a programming language. I'm always curious to give somebody the, none of the above. I'm not going to do it. And so I put that in there, and much to my surprise, just under 10% of the people who have Clojure as their primary said they would quit programming. And I personally find that very, very interesting, a very interesting measure of love of Clojure. And I was curious, I did an analysis to see how many programmers are like all in on Clojure in the question here. Which mix of language? There's like 10% of developers that only use Clojure in its dialect. They literally selected nothing else. They only selected Clojure in its dialect in this mix. And so, I don't know if I haven't done an analysis to see if these are the same 10%, but we're basically seeing two different indicators of a 10% segment that is wildly passionate about Clojure. And so I'm curious what your guys' reaction to these results.
It's funny you should say wildly passionate about it, which I think is a part of it, but I also think it's wildly allergic to going back to any other language. And because I've heard that and I felt that myself, is I would rather become a woodworker or a plumber. Not to say those are bad jobs, but they're just alternates. Instead of dealing with immutable object graph. And so I think it's both of those. I do think that it's telling that functional programming languages are higher in this, is because you can continue using the ideas in another language. There's definitely other languages that promote these as being part of their core. Like you can program in functional style in Java or Python, or you can do that, but you're kind of going against the grain. And so if you can't use Clojure, you want to use another one that's friendly to these concepts. And so, yeah, definitely the other functional ones.
Right. We saw the functional languages already being overrepresented as adjacent languages, companion languages, and now in our second choice languages, they're even more overrepresented. Right, if you look at the relative popularity.
Up there with all of the top, it's very, very interesting. I actually, for me, I switched to programming because of Clojure. So for me, it's really that third option there.
Well, and kind of on that point, I've definitely heard lots of stories of people that say that Clojure made programming fun again.
Yeah.
And I don't know that necessarily fun is a goal, but I think it made it less painful. And so the fun was able to take up more of the space in their minds. And so I think it also can enable you to actually jump into it. I think that's a fascinating demographic, is people that chose.
To this question as well, right? I guess if we assume that we are right about that Clojure makes programming fun, I'm pretty sure we are right about that. Then working with Clojure, that programming can be fun and should be fun.
Mm-hmm.
So then if someone rips Clojure from your hands and you say, okay, you should pick something else, then you probably go for something else that could possibly be fun. And then you're like one of the first things you pick up, I guess.
So for a little bit of background, so part of what I do as a developer advocate is I meet with people and I talk with them on a regular basis. And actually, I started doing this before I got this official role, this official job doing that. I've been doing that for years at this point in time. And so, Peter, I remember when I met with you, and I was just curious to hear about how you came to Clojure. How did you come to using Clojure? And you were telling me how you're a professional programmer, and then you became like a product manager, and you weren't coding at all. And I was just blown away. I was like, wait a minute, how can one of the most prolific people in the Clojure community, prolific programmers, right? One of the most prolific programmers in the Clojure community, not be programming at all? Like that blew my mind, right? And then I remember you telling me how someone is like, you should check this out, and kind of showed you the way, and then that reignited this love of programming. And so that story has, I mean, I'm putting it in my own words, and I'm sure, you could tell the
It's
story
pretty
your own
accurate.
way.
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah. But I mean, that captured me, right? I was like, wow. So Calva and Peter Strömberg, right, would not be around as a programmer, right, without Clojure being just such a neat, different language. And so that hasn't left my mind. And so that's part of what contributed to asking that question too, because I have heard that you're not the only one I've heard who had left programming and came back because of Clojure, but you're the first one I talked to that mentioned that, and that grabbed me. And I was just thinking the alternate universe. What if in an alternate universe, Peter had not come back to programming? Where would we be?
You will be fine.
And so speaking of Calva, I do want to touch on something. I know we're bumping up a little bit against time, and maybe we'll get together. Let us know. So those of you who have made it this far and are watching this, let us know if this is something you're enjoying, if it's something you'd like to hear more about. We can reconvene and discuss this a little more. But I was very curious to do an analysis on the tooling side. So since we have the creator of Calva here, one of the things that jumped out here, and I'm going to pull up the slide, is there was an interesting shift. We always ask about like what tools people are using for developing Clojure. And because I did this analysis this year where I'm segmenting out new people, there is a very interesting shift that I saw here. Whereas if you look at the overall aggregate results, Emacs is still heavily represented, right? We ask, what is your primary Clojure development environment? And Emacs is still heavily represented and very popular. But as soon as you segment out the respondents to those with a year or less, then we see a shift. We see VS Code being the number one. And it's almost like a straight trade, 37%, 38%, 39 almost. VS Code here is like 25%, and here it's 25% for Emacs. So two things. It's interesting how it's almost a straight swap. It also doesn't seem to, you have a little bit lower of IntelliJ and Cursive, which is kind of the main option there. A little bit lower. So there's a little bit of decline there, but it really looks like Calva is affecting Emacs usage far more than even IntelliJ. So I'm curious what you think of that, Pez.
Yeah, so I guess it explains a bit, like we have seen an uptick of Calva, very steady. It hasn't, like from the first survey I saw Calva featured in, and it's every year more a bigger share for Calva, which is natural if new users pick it up more, then they pick up some other editor and use that. It also might be an effect of, I was a beginner to Clojure when I created Calva. I actually hadn't like written any Clojure almost. So I guess I kind of connected with the beginner and from the start tried to make Calva a very beginner friendly environment. So we have focused a bit on that. So I guess that's also behind this, that people in the Clojure community, when they have someone new to Clojure and they don't have a distinct favorite editor, or their favorite editor is VS Code, they seem to be very comfortable with saying, okay, pick up Calva, it's a very good beginner's choice. So I guess that's what I can say about it.
Yeah, I think it's the whole, simple versus easy. And I think we often say simple versus, but it's simple and easy are both, they're both good things, but I think Clojure brings the simple, and I think Calva brings the easy. Because there have been people that I've wanted to introduce to Clojure, and I'm a NeoVim guy, so I'm glad to see NeoVim doesn't have any. In fact, NeoVim is actually more for less than 1 year experience. Yeah, I think the like 0 to I'm writing Clojure code is the easiest experience in Calva, and you want as few roadblocks as possible when you're introducing someone, and I think that's why I think it flips. I think people might migrate into other ones, but the thing is, Calva, from what I understand, I've not used it much, but I think Calva it grows with you as you get more advanced, and so there isn't really as much of a reason to switch. It's like, oh, you can start off with the easy one first, but then you got to go to the professional tools. And then no, I think it satisfies both of those, but because it reaches down into the beginner, that's why it gets more adoption.
So to that point, I think when it comes to like Clojure support, I think it's very true that Calva actually succeeds in also being something you can stay with. It's good. It's a good Clojure tool. It's not just for beginners, unless Java is a big part of your Clojure project.
Right.
Then Cursive comes in, and it's the best choice. But another thing, I guess, that could then you grow out of rather VS Code than Calva, right? Yeah, okay. Emacs is such a different beast, right? It has so much more in the box. It's than VS Code has. So I think that could be like a driver. Okay, so but then if you switch to Emacs, you don't have to sacrifice any Clojure support. You have Cider there that I guess still is much more covering of Clojure than Calva is. But so it's definitely we have not sacrificed the Clojure professional when it comes to Calva. I have been I'm not a beginner anymore, right? So I need the tool to support me still.
Yeah, that too. And a couple things, I like to think of barriers, right? And so if you're new to Clojure, perhaps you're uncertain, how important is this to you, right? Like the value delivered. Like with Emacs and Vim, there's a time barrier there, right?
Yes.
I'm a heavy Vim user, and Nate, I still go and look at your article on setting up Vim because I'm just like, what did I do before? And so I do think that Calva's low barrier. So we're going to see that. And I would be very curious to go and then kind of double segment this. So segment out by new Clojurists and then segment out by professional experience and see what the spread is there. I did not have enough time or tooling to start doing that level of sophisticated analysis. Very sadly, SurveyMonkey is not really a general data science tool.
Right.
But I would be curious. I would be curious to look at that factor of experience, professional experience, because I have a theory then looking at that also, that people who love IntelliJ, want to continue using the tool they love. People who love Emacs want to continue using the tool they love. People like myself who love Vim. So I think there's that continuity bias there also. And so I would be, even if I'm a Clojure beginner, so long as I've decided Clojure is interesting enough for me to use, since if I, as an IntelliJ user, if I were an IntelliJ user, I'm happy to then pay within the IntelliJ ecosystem, right? Because I already know I love that ecosystem. So I think all of these are factors if you want to nuance it, but it was just very interesting to see that trade-off happen between Calva and mostly Emacs, which has long been a recommended path for Clojurists historically. It's like, oh, you want to try Clojure? Use Emacs. And so I think oh, you want to try Clojure? Use Calva has become a thing, or your favorite editor that you already know and love, right?
Yeah,
if you don't have a
that's the
strong
point.
affinity, use Calva. So, and VS Code.
Just want to point out that Cursive does have a community version of it. It does not cost money if you're just using it for your personal choice.
But then IntelliJ still costs money to purchase it in the first place?
No, there's a community edition of that as well, I think.
Okay. So long as you're within the community, then you're not using it for commercial development. Then you can
there's something like that. I don't know the details, but I know that if you're curious about Clojure and IntelliJ is your choice, there is no money that automatically comes to question. There's a community.
Yeah, and then another analysis that could be done is adjacency too. You could look at, for example, Kotlin developers. There's a huge contingent of Kotlin developers who use IntelliJ, right? And so I think we have the options of segmenting some of this data and finding interesting things, but that's a TBD for sure.
There's still a lot of work we need to put into Calva to actually remove barriers. So I just want to put that in as well. We're not at all finished with it. It's there are lots of things we could do there. And at the Clojure Conch, we talked a bit about it, and I got to realize that for Calva to better represent Rich Hickey's idea about how it should be to get started with it, we actually need to tweak a few things as well. And I think that will become a much better experience.
Definitely, for sure. Like there's a smoothing out that can happen. And I do want to say that Cursive has been around for a long time. It is much loved. It is a great experience with Clojure. And so I certainly am not trying to make this like reasons why adopting Cursive is hard, but we're just trying to understand this shift. And so both with these ecosystems, every ecosystem kind of has its own barriers to adopting it. And so it's just been very interesting to see that the shift has mainly been between Emacs and Calva, as opposed to seeing a big structural shift in the other ones.
Mm-hmm. I do think a lot of times it was like, you want to learn Clojure, you need to learn Emacs. I think that was they were tied together, and I think by far the best experience was in Emacs, and so I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's so overrepresented. And so I think it's just a shift in the recommendation. Yeah.
So that was the case when I started using Clojure. It was like Emacs was the best experience. My colleagues were using Emacs and everything. And I was using Vim. So I didn't get that Emacs, the cider experience, really from it. It was Firebase. I don't know what it was. It was very cool and very good, but it was not the same like integrated experience. So that's actually that's why Calva is named Calva, because it's distilled from cider. So that was my
oh, nice.
Really,
I do think the fact that a lot of the cool Emacs stuff is now in Clojure LSP, which is for all editors. So there's a lot of the magic that was built in has kind of been democratized. So it's less attractive, or less the reason why, So anyway.
It's actually you can open up any editor and have a lot of the things that you just plug in Clojure LSP and up pours
right
Clojure support. So that's a very good point.
Yeah, there's been shifting away from Emacs specific tooling being the center of gravity, and that's moved into more cross editor tools and other options. And speaking of Clojure LSP, we've been mentioning a lot. We've been mentioning Calva, and of course, Peter, we have you here, but Clojure LSP and a number of projects. So it kind of in closing, because we're we've been talking for a while. In closing for this session here, and let us know if you like this, if you want to hear more. We would love to do this again. In the survey, so about 44% of the people who took the survey took some time to thank somebody. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I took all the open responses and I ran it through an LLM to try to kind of extract out mentions. And so somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 different people, just under 200 distinct people who were thanked, which is incredible. And some people obviously are more visible in the community. They get lots of mentions. I know, Peter, you got lots of mentions and things like that. But somewhere around 200 different people, a little under, were thanked. And I just think that is so neat. There's this great appreciation of the work that other people do in the Clojure community. And this is at the end of a fairly long survey. We tried to make it shorter. I mean, optional parts.
This is question 59.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually like when I saw the number like 779 people had answered this question, something like that. I think I was like, how many were that like answered the questionnaire? And then I realized it was almost half of the people answering that had answered this question and that. And I also saw in among the questions that a lot of people, even though the framing of the question is like mention someone, a lot of people just like mention the community as such. And I think that's why you see these 200 different distinct people being mentioned, because it is very special with a helpful community like that. Like, so everyone is coming in touch with the community and got help from someone, and it's not like it's just like 3-4 people that help other people. There are a few people that are helping more than like almost work at the Slack, but everyone is very helpful. So I can see why like everyone come in there. So that guy helped me, so I will mention him, or that gal helped me, so I will mention her. So I think that's very cool, and a tribute to that. It's not only Clojure that is that is done right. I think the Clojure community is done right as well.
If I were to take, once again, I don't have it in front of me, but based on my recollection, if I were to take a broad sweep, the people who get thanked the most, like the most frequently, are people who have either highly visible roles in the community or have highly visible projects, popular projects. But then when you start getting in the long tail, you have people who have just been incredibly helpful in so many different ways. And so it's sort of this power law type thing where there's just long tail of individuals. And so Peter, I love your point. Like, so many people are so helpful.
Yeah.
And so many people have helped so many other people. There's just this culture of helping and being friendly. And you're seeing that show up in this wide gamut of people who are thanked.
Mm-hmm. I think when you find something that does make things more fun, you want to share it with others. And when someone has a difficulty with it, you don't take it personally, but you go, oh, well, if I can just help them unlock this one little thing, they'll have fun too. Like, I think there's a self-replicating part to it. So we've attracted great people, but also I think the technology itself is something that people just organically want to share and want to help out others with, you know. And it is always interesting to me how programming language communities like Python, Rust, Perl, PHP, like, as I say these names, in my mind, I can think of that way that community is. And, you know, whatever it is, sometimes it comes from the leader, sometimes it comes from, you know, prominent members in the community, but you can see that the general thing is of great gratitude. I mean, we have a gratitude emoji in our Slack that a lot of people use. Like I've not seen it anywhere else. So anyway, I think there's a lot to be said there.
There are even a few more Slacks now because I have copied it to other Slacks, but I found it in it was Cora, I think, that introduced it on our Slack and
yeah,
Attitude channel as well. It was very cool.
And so all three of us were mentioned in this list of long names. So I'm curious to ask a personal question. What does that mean to you personally?
Well, I can go start on that. It means so much. I mean, it's some of the mentions I have in there. I mean, they almost make me cry. It's amazing. Like something I have done, whether it's Calva itself or just help someone, where people or like find so much value in that. It makes me happy.
Yeah, I echo those words. I feel like someone told me a long time ago that joy, when you share joy, it doubles. It's not zero sum. And so it just makes me so happy and joyful to know that someone else benefited. Also, it amazes me that people listen to all the stuff that we've said. And so anyway, I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's one of the highlights of my life. So
yeah, you two guys are like my mentors. So really listen to
please.
Thank you. Yeah, I go first. I kind of am surprised, like, oh,
yeah,
because I don't know. I'm plugging away. I'm really focused on the mission. I'm focused on mission, and but then it sort of sinks in, and I just really appreciate it. I just thank you. Thanks to everyone so much for taking some time to fill out the survey, but thank people, including us three.
Yeah,
and, it's just been great, and we would love to hear more from you in the comments in Clojure Slack, or you can come hang out in the Clojure Reddit or in the Clojure Zulip. All of those are pretty popular places for people to hang out. We're there, and but if you like what you're hearing here, let us know, and we can do more of it. And I, of course, am always available to chat, and feel free to send me your comments and thoughts and DMs on the survey and the state of Clojure in general too. And anyway, Nate and Peter, thank you so much for letting me borrow some of your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for the invite.
Steal some of your time.
It's been a pleasure to. I mean, of course, I know Christoph for many, many years, but it's nice to actually interact with you in video, Peter. I've heard lots of good things, and it's been a pleasure. So thank you both.
Thank you both. It was great.
Yes, thank you, and we'll talk again soon.